Hi, I'm Ginny Rosencrantz with the University of Maryland Extension. And it's June. June, that means that things are finally warming up here and we can be outside in our garden or in our lawn and getting things done. June is the perfect time to take a look at a warm season grass. Now usually when I'm talking to you guys about grass, I'm talking about a cool season grass. And I usually bring that up in September because that's the perfect time to do the fertilization. But June is the perfect time to do a warm season grass. So join me for Delmarva Gardens while I introduce you to Zoysia and the many beautiful attributes that it has, right here on Pack 14. Well, grass, what can you say? Summertime grass looks gorgeous. So we're going to look at a couple of different types of grasses. Right now, I'm working with what they call irregular turf type tall fescue. This is a grass that's green all summer, all winter, fall and spring. It's beautiful. It needs a little bit more maintenance than some things do, but it makes a wonderful ground cover. And you can tell that the roots are firmly established to this thing. The grass is a gorgeous, still really good green color. Now this was a sod that was put down, and sod, because of the way it grows, is two different types of grasses. One of them is a turf type tall fescue, and that's a little bush grass, or think of it as little bouquets of leaves, okay? Now if you tried to do a sod of that, it would fall apart. So when they grow sod, they put in some Kentucky bluegrass, which doesn't really survive here, especially in the summertime, but it's great at going ahead and putting the roots together, and also it meshes together. So when you have the Kentucky bluegrass as well as the turf type tall fescue, the tall fescue can grow up through it, which is really good, but the bluegrass will go ahead and kind of weave all those roots that they would need to be. Now the other thing you want to remember about the Kentucky bluegrass is, like I said, it's very susceptible to diseases. So in the spring and the fall, when you put it down, it looks great. If you put it down in the fall, it'll look good all winter, all spring. But come summer, when we have hot, muggy weather, a lot of that grass will start to fade away or get diseases. It gets, every disease known to grass, Kentucky bluegrass gets that. Don't worry though, because if it starts to get funny and thin and all that, all you have to do in the fall is just lightly overseed it. Just basically rake it with a steel rake to make sure that you have some opening areas. Sprinkle the grass seed on. If you're going to fertilize, you have to do a soil test, because Maryland has a Maryland turf lawn law, and you have to make sure that you have the right amount of nitrogen, well actually phosphorus and potassium in the soil before you add any more. So soil testing is really important. We've discussed that before, so it's okay. But that's when you want to go ahead and put a perennial cool season grass. You want to go ahead and do that fertilization and the seeding in the fall. You can put sod down anytime as long as the ground's not frozen. But there's a different kind of grass that we have here that doesn't require all that fall prep. You can do it in the summertime. The grass is gorgeous in the summer. In the winter, it's brown, so a lot of people go, I don't know whether I like that. But there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to use it. So let's go ahead and introduce you to the Zoysia grass. Okay, we were just over at the perennial turf type tall fescue. They're wonderful, but actually that type of plant needs to have full sun, as does this one. So this is a type of Zoysia. Zoysia is considered a warm season grass. So cool season grass, actually the cool season grasses look kind of off a little bit in the summertime because they can handle the heat and the drought, but they'll actually go dormant. So sometimes you look at your grass and you're like, it doesn't really need to be cut because it didn't grow that much. Don't cut it. If it doesn't need to be cut, don't go on it. I've seen some really, really beautiful turf type tall fescue grasses that in the summertime people walked on it, cut the grass, and just you could see the lines where people were pressing down into it when it was too drought stressed. So sometimes you just have to leave it be. Now, when I talk about drought stress, this grass, the Zoysia, the warm season grass, it has no issues with drought. It actually thrives on really, really dry, hot seasons, which is okay. It also can handle really muggy temperatures too, which again is really good too. So a Zoysia, a warm season grass, is basically dormant in the cold. And then in the springtime, it starts to warm up. And then in the summertime, gorgeous emerald green grass, really dark depending on the variety you have. And it stays green all through into the first part of really, really cold fall. Once it's established, you really don't need to even add fertilizer to it. It is one of those very, very easy to do plant. You don't even have to cut the grass half the time. You know, it might not have to be every week, it could be every other week, depending on how fast it's growing. So what are the characteristics of a zoysia? Okay, first of all, it has a wide blade, just like the turf type tall fescue. This one is called Myers 51. And the Zoysia grass here was probably one of the first ones that was brought to the United States from China by a guy named Mr. Myers. And that was back in 1951, so that makes it a kind of an easy way to say it. Now you can see with this, it has, here's the grass, you can see the roots that it has coming up from the grass blades. Every place where there's a leaf, that's called a node, and in the inner node is where there is no leaves. But that's where you find all the little roots. Now, zoysia grass also has what they call stolons, and a stolon is a blade of grass that pops up over the grass itself. And so this right here, even though it doesn't look really pretty, is a stolon. So it's kind of like jumping up. You can see it has a lot of grass roots too. And it's just sort of a different way for it to get established. These are survivors, and they do cover a lot of ground. The other thing about the zoysia grass, and I'm sorry, I wish I could have found one, but it also has underground rhizomes. Now, a rhizome and a stolon, both of those are like a type of modified stem. A rhizome is a modified root, so it can be underground. A stolon is a modified stem, so it has to be above the ground. But then once it's above the ground, it arches up, touches down to the ground, and sends out more roots. So it's a way for the plant to really spread out in all kinds of directions. It doesn't rely on just the roots. It has 3 ways to go ahead and grow, which is good because this really doesn't have seeds. So it cannot do it through seeds. It has to do it vegetatively. So if you were going to go ahead and transplant this, you could go ahead and break it up just like that and just replant these without any problem at all. Isn't that cool? Now, this is a newer variety right here. And I want to show the difference between the foliage. This is the Myers. This is the oldest one that we have, the original zoysia. And you can see how they've gone ahead and done a lot of breeding to go ahead and have a much thinner blade. And it has a deeper green color. The Zoysia Myers is more of a yellow-green right now when you put it next to this Zion, which is the newest one. Okay, I wanted to go ahead and share another variety. Every time you have a plant that is successful, the plant breeders say, what can I do to make it better? That's really important, because if you use the same old plant and you don't try to make it better and you know it's got some issues, well then you're never going to take care of the issues. One of the issues that all the zoysia has is that it has issues with different types of grubs. There's only one grub, it's called a billbug. And then it also has a problem with something called a mole cricket. And a mole cricket actually has like little hands that kind of like dig through the ground and tunnel underneath with the roots. What it does is it dries the roots out, which is not good. We have mole crickets here on the Eastern Shore, but not an awful lot. So that's not the same problem that you would have, say, down in Florida, where this also grows really nicely. The other type of issue that all plants have, if it's not a bug, it's a disease. And for the most part, the diseases that zoysia has is if you give it too much water. It's hard to do, but if you give it too much water, then it can get like a leaf disease. But every time they come up with a new variety, we're going to go see one called Empire. It is more disease resistant. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. But before we go, I wanted to share with you, see this stuff right here is a compost. This is actually called a soil conditioner. And it is made from the leaves of trees and the leaves of bushes and grass leaves. And it's called Leaf Pro. They call it a soil conditioner because they do not give you the soil nutrients, how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So you can use it a lot with different things like your vegetable gardens and your trees and shrubs. If you use it on your lawn, you basically have to use it like a top dressing and only just a little, because again, we don't know what the nitrogen content or the phosphorus or the potassium content is. But if you do use it and dig it into the soil, put it into the soil and incorporate it, then you can go ahead and use it because it's not going to run off. What you would do, let me grab this real quick. You have an area right here where this soil is really sandy. If you see, you dig, see how sandy that is? That is our typical sandy Eastern Shore soil. If I add some of this to it and mix it up with it, notice how it does mix really nicely. A little bit of the black soil, well, actually soil conditioner. Okay, and I'm going to smooth that out. Now, within a week, all the Zoysia grass that's here is going to zoom right in there for two reasons. One, that soil is no longer compacted. And two, there's a lot more nutrients in that soil now because sand does not hold nutrients. It's just incapable of it. It's good for letting all the water run through, which is perfect. But if your grass needs to have nutrients, it needs to have something a little bit more than sand. And instead of using any chemicals, which are okay, but that's a short-term thing. If you want to do long-term, you want to make sure that you add the soil conditioner just so you can go ahead and have that soil look a lot better. Okay, well now that I've added the soil conditioner, I'm going to go ahead and take the grass that we pulled up to show you guys. And you can see here's where the roots are. The roots are always on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I can go ahead and get them buried in the ground again. So basically dig a hole, add your roots, add the soil. There we go. And I'm going to add a little bit more on here. Now this is the stolon, the one that's above ground, and I'm kind of let that go. Anytime you plant something, you do need to water it. So we'll just go ahead and water it. There we go. Now this is very, very similar to using a plug. And that's basically taking a piece of the sod, cutting it into a small square or a round, however you want to do it, or strips, and then put it in the soil. You want to make sure that you add some sort of soil conditioner first. You want to make sure you have a soil test to know if you need to add lime. This guy likes to grow in soil pH that's about a 6, 6.5 to maybe 7. And then just water it so that the roots will take hold into the ground. So let's go ahead and take a look at some different type of grass. We're going to look at something called Empire. Okay, this is Empire. This is the second generation of Zoysia grass. And if you take a look at it with the Myers 51, you notice that this blade is a different shade of green. It's not as dark a green as the Empire. Let me pull up the Empire grass. And you see how the Empire grass is a deeper, richer green? It also warms up quicker, or it colors up quicker, I should say. So it's very much more cold tolerant. It can warm up a lot quicker in the springtime, which means that it also stays warm longer in the fall, which is perfect. It has all the other characteristics, but it's also a little bit more resistant to some of the leaf issues that you can have with the Myers. So, but look at this next to the Zion. This is the newest one. And again, this grass is very, very fine bladed. It is even more resistant to cold. So it grows and greens up even faster than the Empire. And it stays greener longer than the Empire. So we're going to go ahead and work with that in a little bit. But what I wanted to also mention, one of the things you have to remember when you're working with zoysia, especially in the beginning, when you're first getting it started, you're going to have weeds in the ground. That's because you're not putting down grass seed evenly like you would with a cool season grass. So you have to go ahead and either hand pull the weeds or put down what they call a pre-emergence weed killer. A pre-emergence weed killer will only kill the seedlings of all kinds of things that grow, whether it's a good grass or a weed. It doesn't know the difference. So you would never put down a pre-emergence weed killer and then try to put down grass seed. You'd just be wasting your time and your money and you'd have dead grass seed. Not what you want. So let me show you some of the weeds that we would have to work with. This right here is a grass that is very, very popular in real sandy soils. It's called knoll or German moss. And oh, I pulled up some of the Myers. Oh, I'm sorry, that would be Empire. And this one right here thrives in real sandy soil. So even if you didn't know that this soil was real sandy, all you'd have to do is take a look at what kind of weeds are growing in there. You would want to go ahead and pull that out and then put down a pre-emergence weed killer in the springtime. This is a plantain. This is a biannual. So putting down the pre-emergence weed killer would not take out the actual plant, but it would take out the seedlings of it that it will have next year. This is probably the first year where it does a little rosette of foliage, and then the next year the rosette of foliage is there, but the seeds will come up from the center, and they will go ahead and throw their seeds everywhere so that they can survive too. So that you have an annual and a perennial that you could control with a pre-emergence weed killer. So this is still, though, an excellent grass, and if you have that, I think you would really enjoy it. But let's go ahead and take a look at the Zion. Okay, what I'm going to do is get a little spot ready. And I'm just sort of taking off any pine shafts or anything that would be here and just sort of putting them in a pile just to get them out of the way. This can be gone ahead and thrown into a compost pile, and that would be a good idea. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is you can use a shovel or a spade, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the annual weeds. The annual weeds can just be, go ahead, by cutting the roots just like that. This would be things like annual crabgrass, any type of annual broadleaf. Now, this is clover, not a desirable one, but I'm going to go ahead and get that out. Now I'm going to have to actually dig down and get that out because it has a much more aggressive root system. Now, back in the day when people didn't have a lot of nutrients in their ground and they didn't have a way to use a chemical fertilizer, you actually encourage clover to grow in your lawn because clover actually holds on to nitrogen with their roots. It's a really cool thing. You see the roots, and the roots have like little teeny sort of bumps on the roots, and that's where the roots have gone ahead and created like a little package area where it grabs a hold of nitrogen and holds on to it. But it shares it with the grass, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and get a little bit more of this done. All right. Now, because this grass, or excuse me, the ground has been prepared by a builder, he's gone ahead and graded everything and compacted it really bad. So when you try to put your shovel in, it only goes a quarter of an inch. This is really hard compacted grass or soil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of the soil conditioner. And again, because this is not a fertilizer, I have to go ahead and work it into the soil. So what I'm going to do is spread it in a little bit of the area that I'm working at, and then mix it into the soil, just kind of like I did before with the other one. What this is going to do is it's going to help the soil not only retain moisture and retain nutrients. If you do this and then later on come back with, like, say, a plugger or a type of aerator, that would even be better. But this is the beginning. And this is what you can do when you don't have any heavy equipment, which we don't. So I'm just putting this together like this. And you can already see that the soil is looking a little bit better. Now, one thing that they do say about compaction is you can add as much nutrients as you want, but if your soil is too compacted for those roots to get through, then you're not going to have a really good grass. The nice thing about zoysia, remember I said it has stolons and rhizomes and roots? So it can go ahead and grow on top of the soil pretty easily. We're just going to go ahead and encourage it to grow a little bit deeper with the addition of a soil conditioner. Now, by breaking it up like I did, I also did a lot of interesting things to actually the soil tilth. But by adding the soil conditioner, I probably improved the soil tilth. And now that we've broken it up and made it a little bit more loose and easier for the soil to go, or the roots to grow ahead and grow into it, it will probably encourage a lot more beneficial insects, beneficial fungi, and bacteria to thrive in here too. So there we go. And you can tell, look at the difference in the soil. This has got soil conditioner mixed into it. This right here is just still sand. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and take the Zeon, which is right here, and I'm going to put it into some small squares, or you can do strips, whatever works best. The larger the piece, the easier it is for it to get established, but it just depends on how much time you have for it to grow and how much money you want to spend. So once again, I have to get my spade. There we go. That would be a strip, and I'm going to go ahead and do it in squares.
And why are you making it smaller?
I make it smaller so that you have more you can go ahead to share. The smaller it is, the more you can go ahead and spread it out. You can spread this out to as far apart as a foot each or 6 inches. 6 inches is probably better because it will actually grow together in just a couple of years. A foot apart, you have to wait a little bit longer. So if you take a look at these little blocks of grass, notice that you can see all the roots and the beautiful little blades of grass. Even though this was cut like that, you can see that they have some really good soil here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it on top, and then you have to water it. So 1, 2, I'm going to put them about 6 inches apart, 3, and I went all the way over here, so I'll put that over here. And a couple more. Is this going to look different? Yes, of course it will. Okay, so I've gone ahead and made like a little checkerboard with just a couple of inches in between. The next thing is really important. You've got to add water. Plants will only grow if they have water to grow. There's an old saying, if you could go ahead and put water in a desert, you would definitely have a lot of things growing. And they've proved that into a lot of places that there is a desert. The heat, of course, can be a restriction, but most of all, the limiting factor is water. So what I'm doing right now is I'm soaking the sod. You only do this the first time you put it in because you want to have a really good sod and sod roots to soil contact. Now here we have a lot of a beginning erosion simply because there's no real grass yet. But this will slow down the erosion, and this will very, very quickly start to spread out. And by the end of summer, I think this will be a solid patch of zoysia. Now again, the color of the Zeon is a little bit darker, a little bit richer color. And it has a very, very small, thin leaf, which I think is very beautiful. Very, very, very strong root system. And when you're buying sod, you can see it. I mean, like it holds together in these little soil bricks because of how wonderful that root system is. Okay, good. So with something like this, you'd want to go ahead and make sure that the sod doesn't really dry out at all. So you'd want to have to water at least once a day for the first week or so until it actually gets established. Sometimes it takes 2 weeks. So keep on watering it, and every now and then, after a week, just pick it up a little bit. See if there's any resistance. If there's no resistance, let it continue to be watered. That's really important. But once it started to get established and gets into it, zoysia does not need an awful lot of water. As a matter of fact, it can often get diseases if there's too much water. With this sandy soil, that probably will not be a problem. The other thing you want to do after it gets started a little bit more, as a warm season grass, you do not want to fertilize this in the late fall. And the best time to fertilize it is in the summer or early springtime, so it can go ahead and have all the nutrients it needs to go ahead and grow really richly through the summer while it gets this stuff really well established. Now again, you could go ahead and use a chemical fertilizer, and that would be all right. It gives you what you need. You want to have something like a 1-0-1. It does not need a lot of phosphorus. It has those 3 different types of roots. It has the regular roots, it has the rhizomes that also makes roots, and it has the stolons, the above ground part, that also makes roots. So it has 3 different sets of roots that you don't need to add any phosphorus for. Potassium, yes, it likes potassium. Potassium helps it do better. It's kind of like a vitamin for it, as somebody said, but what I think it does is it sort of balances everything out for the plant. But if you have a source of compost that has the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium on it, then you can go ahead and add the compost as a light top dressing in the early springtime over top of zoysia, and it will just go to town. Every year you do that, that compost will sift its way through the soil profile. If you have really bad sandy soil, I shouldn't say bad, it has really good drainage, but if you have real sandy soil, it will help go through that sandy soil, filtering that sand and adding the little compost as it goes into the soil profile. You want those roots to grow down at least 2 to 3 inches. By adding the compost every year, you're going to have a little bit more compost sifting down through the roots. So after about 5 years, you're going to have wonderful soil, absolutely wonderful soil. And all the little beneficial guys that are in the soil are going to love you. So it's a good thing. It just takes a little bit of time. The other thing I didn't mention is that when you're dealing with a zoysia lawn, whether it's the old-fashioned Meyer or the newer Empire or the newest Xian, which is really, really pretty, you're going to have to deal with something called thatch. Is the leaves that are growing on the grass, but after a while the leaves die and then they decompose. Well, that's really good for a grass that's growing right on the ground. But remember, we have the rhizomes that grow underground, we have the grass that grows above the ground, and we have the stolons that grow above the ground. So you have 2 different types of leaves that are above the ground. The regular ones that are connected directly by the roots and the ones that are in the stolons. So you have a lot more leaf that as it dies, maybe it doesn't have a chance to get really good contact with the soil and compost as quickly. So you actually have to remove the thatch. One way you can do that is just take a rake. That's a lot of work. But you can go ahead and rent maybe once every 10 years, 5 to 10 years, a dethatcher. And what that does, it kind of combs through the grass and pulls up all that dead grass leaves that has not had a chance to have good soil contact, and therefore it doesn't compost. Now you can put that in a composter, it'll compost beautifully, and in another year you'll have beautiful composted soil to put on top of your zoysia again. So anyways, it all works out pretty well. You might be wondering why there are so many different types of zoysia grass in this homeowner's backyard. Well, first of all, the oldest one, that's a memory grass. That's one that his dad started at their first house. So every time he's moved, he's taken little portions of it with it. And so that makes it kind of like an heirloom grass for him, which is pretty cool. Then he did the Empire to see how that would look and to see if that would be a better grass for his yard. Now with the Xian grass, that again is a new one. So he's going to check that out to see that's a better one. And then he can decide how much he wants to go ahead and purchase. Either way, he's going to have a beautiful lawn that will thrive in the heat, thrive in the drought. He won't have to do much watering. He only have to cut it once a week or once every other week. And he won't have to fertilize it more than maybe once every 2 or 3 years. Once it's established, you don't have to fertilize a zoysia lawn. Wow, that's going to save you money in the long run. Well, I hope you enjoyed this grass talk, and thank you for joining me for Delmarva Gardens right here on Pack 14.